Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, David, and welcome to our listeners all around the universe. This is episode 390. This is another Ask David episode with some pretty interesting comments.
And questions.
Questions. Yeah. That's what I meant. Questions.
Yeah, we'll give the comments. You ask the questions.
First, let me read this really cool endorsement that we got. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the number of the podcast, but I can look it up while we're talking. This is from Marie, who lives in Europe. And she writes, "Dear Rhonda and David, I've been meaning to tell you how much I loved the podcast about the GRIP program from San Quentin. What an amazing system. I have it on my to-do list, to look and see if there's anything similar here in Europe. I also loved the podcast with Dr. Robin Matthey. My youngest son is transgender, and I was so touched by so much of what Robin talked about. I was also very grateful that my wonderful son lives here, where transgender rights are very protected. As an adult, you simply go to the government office and declare your gender and your new name. We walked out with his new identity in hand, and his insurance covers all of his transition. There are still struggles, but at least that is not an issue. Thank you so much for bringing such varied subjects to the podcast. You guys do a great job connecting the transgender topic to the team model and how it applies the same way to this population, just like any other, normalizing the mental health treatment of transgender people who need empathy and acceptance from their mental health providers the same way any other clients do. So thank you both for everything you do." Marie.
Marie, thank you so much, Marie, for your touching and thoughtful note. And I just agree with you 200%. And, sometimes the most simple messages are the ones that humanity has the greatest trouble grasping and understanding. And, the Beatles had that song, all you need is love. And it seems so obvious. And yet we spend so much time in hatred and battle. Mm-hmm. So my hat's off to everyone who's doing something about becoming more loving and supporting greater love and acceptance, because there's so much suffering in the world. But I'll shut up now and stop babbling and get on to your questions.
Okay. You're never babbling about love.
Yeah.
So this was from Rizwan, who is a member of the Tuesday training group that you run with Jill Levitt. And, one of the things I want to say before I read these is you put a ton of effort into writing show notes that describe the question, that list the questions that I ask and that describe in detail the answers that you give. And sometimes people have told me they don't know how to access the show notes. And because you put so much effort into it and they're so fun to read, could we talk just for a minute about how people can can look at the show notes and how they access them? Do you know?
Yeah. Well, I don't know all the ways, because there may be where you get your app. Maybe somehow you can get the show notes through there. But if you just go to my website, www.feelinggood.com. That's feelinggood.com. The name of my first book, Feeling Good. That's D-O-T. Not daughter, but dot, calm. And that's not C-A-L-M. It's not like calm, but it's like calm for this thing called the internet. And once you go there, you just, there's a little thing that says podcasts, and then there's a list of all the podcasts with links. And so you just click on that, you can see all 390 or however many podcasts we're up to, and they're all listed by number and by title and by a link, and you click on that link and you'll go right to the show and the show notes. And especially, I mean, some people just like to listen and you don't want to dig too deep into a topic, but sometimes the show notes have a tremendous amount of additional and information. So if you're trying to help yourself or trying to learn about techniques to use with your patients, or if you're just simply interested in philosophical topics at a deeper level, sometimes you'll find some extra gold nuggets there in the show notes.
Yeah, thank you. So that's feelinggood.com, FEELINGGOOD.com.
Yeah, also known as feelinggood.com, in case we didn't mention it.
Yeah, okay.
And one other thing I wanted to mention is that the Feeling Great app should be out by the time this podcast is out. And so if you're interested in taking a ride on it and seeing what it's like, that would be go to feelinggood.com/app, and then you'll get that'll direct you to the Feeling Great app, the Feeling Great website, and you can get information there about purchase or taking a free trial with the Feeling Great app and see what it's like.
Coolio. That sounds like really so many people have been waiting for that. It's really exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Rizwan, back to him, who's a member of the Tuesday training group you run with Jill, sent you this question. I have a question about the acceptance paradox that came to my mind during our Tuesday training group on December 19th of last year, 2023. As homework, will it be useful to ask clients to make a list of things which they have already accepted in their life and made peace with? And then at the next stage, in the session following, would it be useful if the therapist asks their patient, why did you accept and make peace with those things? Can you use the same criteria to accept other things in your lives which you are not accepting now?
And I would say absolutely you can do that. And my answer exists on two different levels. The first level is that's a cool idea, and try it with some of your patients, and then let us know how it works. And so some of the rest of us can try that. The second thing I want to know is that team is not something rigid or written in stone. It's like a rapidly evolving thing. I create new techniques pretty much on a weekly basis and have ever since 1976 or 77, when I first was learning what we used to call cognitive therapy, what we now call team therapy. It's evolved. But that's an important part of it. Amy, who was on just recently, created a new version of the counterattack technique called stroking the cat or petting the cat. It's a kind of a gentle version of the counterattack technique, and that's very cool. And so absolutely, Rizwan, and thank you so much for that cool idea. And then one other idea that I had is that I look at acceptance, which we've been talking about in the last two podcasts. It's not so much a technique that you have to learn. It's kind of a discovery that you make where you suddenly see something that was invisible to you before. But it's also a decision that you make, and the decision has to do with self-love. The decision to love and accept yourself, to treat yourself with gentleness, with love and compassion, especially when you screw up, to talk to yourself the way you might talk to someone you loved who was hurting, and you would probably want to give them support and encouragement, and that's really all there is to it, and but it also involves the great death that the Buddha talked about, because it's giving up this idea that you have to be special, and suddenly realizing that you're really not special. Very few of us have much of anything about us that's special. We're below average in 50% of our attributes.
Yeah.
And acceptance is the discovery that when you accept your averageness, or in my case, below averageness, because I screw up so much all the time. And then when you discover that people still love you, and there's still joy, and food still tastes good, and your cat still loves you, and you can love hanging out with your equally average cat, and kind of find the magic and miracle of life. That's what acceptance is about. It's not becoming special. Most of us suffer because we're beating up on ourselves because we're not special. And that just leads to misery. And when you suddenly discover that you no longer need to be special, then at that moment the whole universe changes, and you discover that life becomes special. It's kind of a trade-off. I'm going to look out the window right now because I see something in the backyard. I think I might have seen my cat in the backyard, because I took her out day before yesterday for the first time in months, because it's been so cold and windy. And that's an example of what I'm talking about. It was so fantastic. She was so grateful that I took her out for about 30 minutes, and then she was ready to come back inside. But it meant so much to her. And I just saw her. I think my wife is taking her out because we promised to take her out today because it's sunny outside. And that's more what I'm talking about. The joys of hanging out on an early pre-spring day when it's sunny, and your cat is just eating grass and exploring things, and so excited just for little things. That's what acceptance is like: accepting yourself, accepting others, and accepting the world. And it's so hard for us as human beings because we fight so hard for the right to endlessly beat up on ourselves and criticize ourselves for all of our faults and failures. I'll shut up again.
Don't shut up. That was brilliant. And it's heartwarming, everything that you've said.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's anxiety relieving.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Next question.
Someone sent anonymously this question: how do you convince someone that depression is not due to a chemical imbalance in the brain, and that you can change the way you feel by changing the way you think? Dear David, I love listening to your podcasts, and now I am seeing differences in my life. But my father, who has been depressed for about 40 years, has not. He is on medicines and has an extreme belief that it's only on the basis of has extreme belief that his depression is due to a chemical imbalance. He's a pharmacist by profession and loves to learn about how chemical changes mood swings. I'm not able to convince him to read your books. He takes sleeping pills every single day, and then he sleeps all day. He is learning something about neuroplasticity, which actually is what happens in CBT. But he thinks it's some kind of thought-changing therapy which cannot change the chemical in our brain. Please help, David. I'd love it if you answered this.
Yeah, well, there's two levels to answer this question. Let me say that you're right. That there is no good evidence that depression results from a chemical imbalance in the brain. And I won the top award in brain research in 1975 for my work on brain metabolism of serotonin. I got the A.E. Bennett Award for that research.
Wow!
And it was a worldwide competition. And I was a postdoctoral fellow at Penn, and it was my first experiment. But I just had a tremendous collaborators, and we did this fantastic study of computer simulation of brain serotonin metabolism. But I never saw any evidence that a chemical imbalance like serotonin had anything to do with depression. And we published a key article on that in the Archives of General Psychiatry, which was at the time the top psychiatric research journal, and really kind of a proof that depression had nothing to do with brain serotonin levels. And only now, like maybe must be 35 years after that article was published, are people finally quoting that article, and new surveys are coming out all the time showing that the whole chemical imbalance theory was never anything other than rubbish. And it's supported by the psychopharmacology industry, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry. They keep pumping out these chemicals that claim to have effects on brain serotonin. They probably do. They just don't have anything other than a placebo effect. And it's kind of a sham. But
David, didn't that shake up the pharmaceutical industry when you published that?
No. They just they just kept spending hundreds of millions on advertising and selling billions of dollars of so-called antidepressants. But
did they go after you to discredit your research?
No, but I did give a presentation at an American Psychological Association convention a number of years back with my colleague David Antonuccio from Reno, who organized it, and we kind of presented a lot of young researchers who had been targeted in a cruel way by drug companies, and there was a lot of scandal about it. But I was invited to give a keynote address at a research conference at the Harvard Medical School, believe it or not. And when the department chairman introduced me, he said something like, I'm proud to introduce Dr. David Burns from the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. And he's going to show us how you can change brain chemistry with cognitive behavioral therapy and without drugs. And those were the days when cognitive therapy was new. And so it was a really sweet and kind introduction, and was exciting. But that's not the point of my answer to our friend Anonymous. And that's that if somebody's dead set on believing something, I don't think there's much mileage in trying to persuade them that they're wrong. I've published a lot of articles in top flight psychology journals debunking a lot of theories that are popular. And never once has anyone associated with any of those theories sent me an email to say, hey, I saw your challenging research and kudos for what you're doing. It's trying to argue with somebody just intense. They just become defensive, and there'll come some kind of flimsy argument to support their position. So I think it's a mistake to try to. This is my own point of view, and you can try to persuade your father to the end of time, and he'll just stick to his guns. People believe what they want to believe, and they'll take pills that they want to take. But I would rather just empathize with somebody and try to find a grain of truth in their thinking and support them, and not engage in that dialogue. And we've done a number of podcasts on this topic. Like one of the best ones is how to help and how not to help. And so if you're involved in one of these codependent relationships where you're trying to help someone who's got their heels dug in, that might be a podcast that you'd want to listen to, at least if you're looking to change yourself and see your own role in the problem rather than trying to change the other person. And there's something incredibly important to say about this that Rhonda is now going to share with all of us.
Well, when I first read this, my first reaction was just don't do it. And I just echo everything that you said, David, that if you try to argue with someone, they really cling to their beliefs even stronger. And that can lead to arguing and pulling away from the relationship and feeling alienated from each other, which is the opposite of what we want when you get close to someone. And when we do what you call sitting with open hands, where we just accept them and allow them to talk about their experience, that could be really supportive. And like you said, you just gave a perfect example of a disarm, where we use the 5 secrets of effective communication, to find a grain of truth in what they're saying, to grow closer to them, to respond, to use thought empathy, repeat back what you heard them say, and to imagine what they're feeling and talk about your feelings. But also, you could share your personal story and experience with team theory, but only to be vulnerable and open-hearted, not to try to convince them to do something or believe something.
Exactly. Say, here's my experience, and I know yours is different, Dad, but I love you to death, and I love you to life too, and just let go. But then now we're telling you what to do, and I don't want to do that either. And one thing that stands out in my mind is your tremendous love for your father, and he's lucky to have a son like you.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, now here's Brian, who's asking for tips on job interviewing. Hi, David. I hope you're keeping well. I'm wondering if you have any tips or strategies or resources that you can recommend for an upcoming job interview. Also, you once told a story of someone who worked in the tech industry that you counseled, and you recommended some questions for him to ask in periodic performance reviews. Does that ring a bell at all? I've had trouble remembering and locating that podcast.
Yeah. Well,
that's from Marc.
I'm happy to address both of these, which are slightly different questions, but the job interviewing is one of my favorites because there is a secret to job interviewing. And if you know it, you'll be pretty much the top candidate for every job you interview for. And if you don't know it, you're going to get screwed over in every interview. And the secret has to do with not trying to impress the person who's interviewing you. And this goes against the grain of your belief and the way everyone goes about it. Everyone tries to impress the interviewer. And now I learned this in a lot of different ways. But I used to be when I was living in Philadelphia, the referral shrink for the law school at the University of Pennsylvania. So when students came to the dean to say, I'm having panic attacks and I think I'm going to drop out of law school, she would refer them to me. And to if they wanted some counseling to help them with their decision and with their panic attacks, but one of the things that they were upset about was that the seniors couldn't get jobs. That there was an excess of attorneys in Philadelphia. And they would have as many as 50 job interviews without a single job offer.
Ooh, that's awful.
And so there were 8 or 10 of them that I counseled, during one spring period. They were all coming to me at once. And they were trying to impress the interviewers, and I said, the only way to impress the interviewers, impress them with themselves. So find out who's going to interview you, find out their name, and then look them up on the internet and learn about them and find some really cool things about them. And ask them about that when you have the job interview. So you'd say, you could say something like, listen, I've been following your work for some time, and I understand you were involved in the such and such case on environmental contamination in, last year. And I thought you were just doing some some brilliant stuff there, and I'm wondering, I had a question or two for you about it, and I'm wondering, is it, if I were to come to this firm, would I have the chance to do some of the exciting things that you're doing? And can you tell me how long have you worked here? What do you think is great about this law firm? And then if they say something to you like, well, why should we want you? All the top law students from all the best law schools are applying to us, and 3 of them have won Nobel Prizes, and they all have IQs above 200. So why should we want you? And then you say, I don't know if you should want me. Tell me about what you're looking for in a great candidate. What are the candidates who have really been stars at your firm? What were they like when they first joined? What were their attributes? What made them great team members? And what are the kinds that you're trying to avoid? And then whatever they say, just say, I'm so fascinated with what you're saying. That makes so much sense. And I don't know if you should want me. I'm trying to find out if my skill set would be good for your company, and if your company would be good for my skill set. But meeting you has been incredibly exciting to me. And whether or not I come here, I'm certainly number one on your fan club type of thing. And so the idea, I mean, you want to present yourself in a good way, but you're not trying to impress them because they're bored. They're not interested in you. See, that's the mistake people in job interviews make. You think they're interested in you. They don't give a shit about you. They're trying to get home and have a martini or something like that. And so instead, you've got to be interested in them, and because that's who they care about. They're mainly pretty narcissistic people. And so if you compliment them and flatter them and show a genuine human interest in them, form a genuine relationship with you, then you're the one they're going to want. And I can tell you, all the people that I counseled there, they became, after they learned how to do that, we practiced it with role playing. Then they contacted me later and they said they're the number one candidate at every law firm they interview at, because they use this strategy. And before that, they'd been turned down, some of them 50 law firms in a row.
Wow.
And so that's the job interviewing strategy. We can role play it if you like, Rhonda, and demonstrate it.
Okay.
Do you want to be the interviewee or the interviewer?
No, the interviewer.
Okay, and are we looking for, what kind of job am I interviewing for?
We're looking for a social worker at a hospital. Can you be a social worker at a hospital? You've interacted with social workers before.
Yeah, but I'm applying for the social work position at the hospital.
Yes.
And you're Dr. Rhonda Borofsky, because you have a background in social work, right?
I do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So
I have a master's in social work.
You're interviewing me for the social work position. Go ahead.
Uh-huh. Well, Dave, is it okay if I call you David?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'd be flattered. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
can I call you Rhonda, or should I call you Dr. Borofsky?
Oh, no, Rhonda's fine. Sure.
Oh, that is so awesome, because I've been listening to your podcast for years, and you're one of my heroes.
Oh, gosh. Thank you. Well, David, I'm just kind of curious, why would you want to work in a hospital? It's kind of a scary, smelly place, and we get a lot of drug addicts in here and people who've been assaulted and homeless people, and it can be a pretty challenging job. What makes you interested in it?
Well, I'm so interested in what you're saying, because I just think it's a crime the way medicine is in America is catering to the wealthy, and I think there's a lot to learn from this population. I'd be excited and honored to work in this environment. And in fact, I know this guy, David Burns, who did his internship at Highland Hospital, which is a county hospital. And he told me how awesome it is to work with that population. But I know you've been working here, and you're one of the smartest people I've ever known. Hearing you on that show, you're fantastic. Tell me what it's been like for you to work here at the hospital, and What's it been like for you working with people who were at the homeless and at the bottom of the socioeconomic spectrum? And what about it brings joy to your heart?
Ooh, I love that question.
Yeah. Why?
Well, you're flattering me, but I don't feel like you're fawning over me. And you're right that I would like to tell you what I like, because if I started here as a social worker and worked my way up to be a director or the person that's doing the interview, I have lots of experience that I would like to share with you and tell you what I like about the job, so that then I could see if those are qualities that you have or those things that might interest you.
Tell me all about the job. I'm eager to hear what you have to say, and why you came here and why you've stayed here. I saw in the paper about your new program for helping population X, Y, and Z, and I'm eager to hear how that's working out.
Well, I first came here because I was interested in working with people who have been sexually assaulted, and
oh my God,
yeah, and police bring people that have called them and told them they were just assaulted to the ER, and so I feel so protective, and I want to help them through the process of getting good treatment and starting them on the road to recovery. And then that led to working with other populations that come into the emergency room. And then that led to training new social workers. And then that led to the place where I am now, where I can pull people in that I think are talented and interested in helping people survive who are really struggling with life.
I'm so touched by what you're saying. If I were to come here, would there be any chance I could work with you or get some training from you?
Yes, I run a consultation group once a week, and and part of your job would be to participate in that.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Tell me about that. So that's how I would do it.
That's nice.
And I won't repeat the story of how I got into the Stanford Medical School, because you've probably heard it at least twice already.
How you got into the Stanford Medical School?
Yeah.
No, I know about how many times you've cut classes when you were in the medical school.
Okay.
And how you went on dates with crazy, fun-loving other men who taught you how to dress when you were at school.
We were going on dates with women, though, but they were mentoring me and teaching me how not to be so nerdy.
But I don't remember how you got
times.
How did you get into medical school?
Well, I wasn't a pre-medical student at college.
No, you studied philosophy, right?
Yeah, and I was going to go to graduate school in psychology, because I kind of finished with philosophy. I got my questions answered, but my supervisor said, no, you should go to medical school instead of becoming a psychologist, and you can become a psychiatrist. And I said, but I'm not interested in medicine. I'm not a pre-medical student. There's no way I could get in. And he said, "Oh, you can talk your way into anything. So they won't even notice that you haven't had the pre-medical classes." And so I said,
"You hadn't had the pre-med classes?"
No, I'd never had even a biology class. The only one I had was in 7th grade, and I got a B in it.
No, come on, David. Are you joking around?
I'm telling the truth.
You're telling the truth?
Yeah, and so I managed to get interviewed at Stanford, and so when I went there, this fellow was that I was going to interview me. He was in the basement of the museum, and that's where they had all the cadavers down there, and that you dissected as a first year medical student. And this fellow was the head of that department interviewing me, and I didn't want him to ask me a lot of questions about pre-medical classes and stuff. All I could say is, I don't know anything about that. I'm not a pre-medical student. I'm a philosophy major. And I knew he wouldn't want to hear that.
I know nothing about chemistry and biology.
And so I tried to distract him, and I said, "Oh, is this where they dissect the cadavers and stuff?" And I said, "It's kind of dark and creepy down here." and what's it like, working here? And he said, "Oh no, it's very exciting. In fact, my laboratory is right down the hall here." And so I said, "Oh, could I see your laboratory? I would love to see, the kind of research you're doing." And he got all excited, like I was his long lost cousin or something. and he took me down there, and there were all these electrical machines and stuff, and I had no idea about any of them. But I just looked at one and saw the name of it. And I said, "Oh, I see you've got one of these, photoscintillating inverse radiation machines," or whatever it said, which I had no idea what it was. And I said, "Are you using this thing in your research?" He says, "Oh, absolutely. In fact, we're doing a project on that right now with this machine. It's invaluable." I said, "Oh, that's fascinating. Tell me about that." And he got to talking his heart out. And I just kept using the 5 secrets of effective communication, like that's so cool, just stroking inquiry, to tell me more. And time was just flying by. And then he looked at his watch and he says, oh my gosh, we've been talking for over 2 hours. And all I had you scheduled for was 15 minutes.
Wow.
And I've got an important meeting over, at the on the other side of this courtyard here in the medical school. Take a few minutes to walk over there. Here, we can walk over together.
Mm.
And I said, yeah, that'd be great. And as we were going out of the building, he says, "Oh, by the way, I don't know who you are. I forgot to ask what your name is."
Oh gosh,
and
that's important.
Said, oh, I'm David Burns from Amherst College. Then he put his hand on my shoulder and he says, "Well, David Burns from Amherst College."
Mm.
He said, I want you to know you're the type of young man we need at the Stanford Medical School.
Mm. Yeah.
And then I said, "Well, that's really kind of you to say that, but I wouldn't be able to go here."
Mm.
And he said, "Well, why not?" And I said, "Well, my dad's a Lutheran minister, and we don't have any money.
Mm.
And he believes borrowing money is a sin. So I've heard it would cost as much as $100,000 to go to medical school here, and so I'm afraid I can't." And he says, "Oh no, we're not going to let Harvard make you a better offer. I'm the head of the admissions committee." And I'm going to a meeting right now of the admissions committee. And I want you to know you're number 1 on our list.
Oh.
And you're not going to pay a penny for your medical education. And you're going to have a letter to that effect tomorrow in the mail.
Oh. And
so I said, "Well, that's an offer I can't refuse."
Mm.
And so that's how I got into medical school.
I have never heard that story before, and I love that story. That is so touching, and it is so true. You are exactly the kind of person that Stanford and any other medical school should have. Your warmth, your compassion toward others. You have to have that. Your ability to empathize and connect with people.
Yeah.
You can't be a doctor without that, and you have those qualities in spades.
Right. But it's true at any job that you're applying for. They're looking for someone who's interested in them. And that's what I did. I showed an interest in him. Mm-hmm. And that's how I won him over. I didn't have to impress him with my credentials because I didn't have any impressive credentials.
Yeah. So on a side note, how did you manage the medical school classes without the background of science that most people had as undergraduates?
Yeah, well, I cut most of them. I felt so awkward, and so outclassed. But what I got into, they had a kind of a pass-fail system, which and so I got to where I would skip most of my classes because I got so anxious in them. Mm. And then a week before finals, I'd go in and find out what classes I was registered in. And then I would buy the textbook
I'm sorry.
and study them
The
like
week
crazy.
before the final, you would find out what class you should have been in throughout the whole semester?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then studied like crazy. And then they had a pass-fail system. And so you could usually pass, just barely and get by that way.
Uh-huh.
Now, that fellow who interviewed me, one of the classes I took under he was the professor on the histology classes, and that's where you look through the microscope and you have to identify tissues.
Oh.
Like, is it epithelium or endothelium or liver or skin or hair or whatever? That one I was totally hopeless on because I have a kind of visual agnosia and I can't organize things visually.
Oh.
And so I remember that I got like a 68 in that class in the exam. I just studied like crazy. A friend helped me, Charlie Ferris, who was also from my hometown, Phoenix. But that fellow who had interviewed me pulled me aside and said, "You got a 68, and 70 is the lowest passing grade in this class." But we just changed the curve this year to make it 68.
Really?
Yeah. and that's really kind of why I went back to Stanford, after 20 years in Philadelphia, because I want to try to repay that debt.
Huh.
And that's
cool.
why I've been doing so much, on the voluntary faculty.
Yeah. What an incredible story. So it's really hard to believe, but I have to believe you because you're a very honest person, that you did so poorly in medical school and yet could do so brilliantly once you finished your training.
Well, it's interesting that what I'm doing now is psychotherapy. That's what I always wanted to do, to work with people. And there wasn't hardly anything in medical school or psychiatric residency training that I use.
Mm-hmm. Right. You've said that.
Yeah, it was just something you had to do. But when I got to my internship, I started studying like crazy. I made up for my bad delinquency as a medical student. And
you mean at Highland Hospital?
At Highland, yeah. That was the only place that would have me. That they would have taken anybody who has a warm body. Mm-hmm. It was fantastic at Highland Hospital. They were working with huge numbers of the most severely psychotic people imaginable.
Yeah,
and the worst of the worst in the medical emergency room. They had 8,000 trauma cases per month. Severe.
What? Oh my God!
And they were so fantastic at Highland Hospital, and they were so kind to me, and they let me kind of learn as I was going, and because I didn't even know how to use a stethoscope when I showed up for my internship, but I started in the emergency
and you came with
room.
a fear of blood.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it was great. And when I took the licensure examination, I couldn't believe how easy it was, because everything we were treating at Highland was way more difficult than what they put on those examinations. And I think I got one of the highest scores, in California in the medical licensure exam. Mm-hmm. But
wow, that's from one end of the extreme to the other.
Yeah. I dropped out of medical school for a full year on 2 different occasions.
You dropped out of medical school 2 different times?
For a year each time.
And they let you back in? I mean, obviously they let you back in.
Yeah, they were very, very, very kind about it and very supportive. That's why I'm trying to give back now. Since I've been back as on the volunteer faculty for 25 years, and I give up to 500. I used to give 800 hours of volunteer work every year.
Well, yeah, you have absolutely given back, because you've been running the Tuesday group. I've been running that group for 20 years.
Yeah.
And you've done that for free.
Yeah.
And you continue to run that for free.
Yeah.
I don't know any other guru or founder of a model of psychotherapy like that you've created that does anything for free. Like you have given so much of yourself and your heart to the community, to the world.
Yeah, I've been trying to give back because they were so patient with me, and I guess they saw something in what they were doing that year. They thought they were going to experiment and get people who were a few people into each class who were different, who weren't pre-medical students.
Oh.
And I was they were saying maybe we need a new kind of leadership in medicine, people who aren't just trying to memorize everything and something like that. And so I'm trying. My hope is that someone there will think that maybe the experiment kind of turned out this guy. And I can remember once in medical school, somebody was asking about it was on the great people in the history of medicine who made the major breakthroughs. And then someone
they mentioned you.
They said, someone asked the professor, well, who do you think in our class is going to make a major breakthrough? And he said, well, it's nothing we'd ever be able to predict because the people who made the biggest contributions were almost always the biggest fuck-ups when they were in medical school.
Really?
The rebels. And then when he said that, I thought, oh, maybe there's some hope for me.
Well, you've proven that to be true.
It was kind of true because not being shaped in all of those ways that medical students are shaped, pre-medical students, because my interest was philosophy and that has an awful lot more to do with what we do, because when in team therapy we're helping people develop a new philosophy that is going to be bring them to joy rather than self-criticism and self-abuse and hating yourself. So how to find joy in life. And so that's kind of where I put my interest and my effort.
I know I have loved hearing you talk about this, and I know everyone that's listening will too. So I really appreciate you sharing that story.
How about one last question?
Let's do one more.
With a role
This
play.
is a really interesting one. So Brian asked about transgenderism, and he wonders if transgenderism results from distorted thoughts. And he writes you, hi, David.
But you're skipping the second question.
Oh, yes. Marc's second question?
Yeah.
Yes. How do you respond to your supervisor during performance reviews?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you?
Well, if you get criticized, you respond with stroking and disarming and inquiry. And we can role play that. The idea is not to get defensive when your supervisor criticizes you, but to make your supervisor feel good about having criticized you. You be my supervisor and give me some criticism on my performance.
Okay. David, I really have to talk to you. There are times when the work you turn in is just stellar, but you come in late, almost every single day to this job, and we start at 8:00 sharp, and you kind of stroll in between 8:30 and 9, and that's just really unacceptable.
Yeah, it's painful to hear that for two reasons. First, you're right, and but second, I admire you so much. It's painful for me to be letting you down. So I'm going to make that number one on my priority list to get in shape and get with the crew here, because this is an incredibly efficient organization, and that's so important to the work that we do. But let me ask you a question. What are some of the other things that I've done that have kind of turned you off or haven't been up to speed? Because I really want to learn from you. To be honest, you're one of my heroes.
Oh, I don't know. That kind of took the wind out of my sails. If you just get here on time, I like everything else that you do. I appreciate I appreciate your work ethic, and you always turn in really good reports, and
Oh.
our clients really relate well to you.
Oh, well, thank you. That's kind of you to say, and I'll put all my effort into being on time or even early. But please uh, keep letting me know if there's other things I should do to change, because I'm not here just to earn a paycheck, but to grow technically and emotionally as well. So I just so much appreciate your feedback.
Okay.
How's that?
That was just incredible.
Yeah.
I'm laughing because somebody told me that once, this was way before I knew team therapy. And I responded like, well, if you don't like me coming in late, I work at lunch and I take work home and and you should be grateful that you have me on your staff, or some version of
Yeah.
that. And that
Yeah.
did not go
Right.
over very well.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's all about being other centered rather than defensive, and having the death of yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
listen to criticism and appreciate it. We have one last question, which is a real quickie, kind of a cool question, but quick to
Okay.
answer.
Dear David, hi David, Happy New Year, and thank you for your amazing Monday podcasts. I just started listening to yours today about transgenderism. Could transgenderism be the result of distorted thoughts? I know it's a very sensitive subject, like antidepressants. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah. Well, I can't give any very expert responses here. We would really need Robin, or maybe you have some expert knowledge here too. But I can tell you my opinion about it is that a lot of things are just biological and inherent in our tissues, and they're not things you can willfully change. Just to give a simple example of it, I happen to love blueberry pie, and I'm Swedish, and when I was a kid, my mom used to make blueberry pie, which is kind of a Swedish thing, and it was just so delicious, and I haven't found many other people who like blueberry pie.
Really?
And I don't like most other pies. Like I don't like what's that one you get
Apple
at
pie?
Halloween? Well, I
Pumpkin
don't like
pie?
that one. No, I don't like that one. I don't like the one you get at Halloween, pumpkin pie. I don't like that one either. But these are just preferences that we have, cats like cat food. I don't like cat food. Well, I don't know. I haven't tried it. I might, but these are things about that are just inherent in our tissues. But emotions are caused by thoughts. Feelings of sadness or joy or depression or inadequacy or hopelessness, those are caused by thoughts, and healthy feelings are caused by undistorted thoughts, and unhealthy feelings are caused by distorted thoughts, like healthy sadness. Yeah, when I think about Obi, who I loved, my cat, who died, who disappeared, and he was my best friend, and I feel sad, and I'll always feel sad when I think about Obi. I want to feel sad because I loved him so much, but that's caused by my thoughts about Obi. He didn't earn my love in any way, but I was very fond of him and loved him so much. But unhealthy depression is caused by distorted thoughts, like I'm a loser, I'm worthless, so I should be better than I am, and what's wrong with me? Things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But sexual preferences and sexual fantasies, I don't think that's something we can, talk in and out of existence. And so to say, is transgenderism the result of distorted thoughts is kind of hurtful.
Right.
Because it sounds like you're trying to, say that somebody transgender has an illness of some kind or a defect of some kind. And I think that some of us are trying so hard to transform these perceptions. Those are caused by distorted thoughts, and love is what we need to, and acceptance is what we need to replace that.
Yeah, and that's bringing us full circle to what you were talking about when we first began. Honoring people who are creating love in this world.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Well,
thank you, David. This was, for my ears, a really marvelous podcast episode. It was wonderful listening to you. And
it was fun just working together,
on
something and jamming. And we appreciate all of you so much who tune in and turn on.
Yeah.
every Monday or whenever you hear our podcast. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.